Okay, I am going to highlight a few things about 1.2, how do economists approach the world. So, again, keep in mind when we're doing this section that you're getting a high level overview of things you're going to learn for the next year and a half. So, you're not really expected to completely be able to understand, review everything. This is just kind of giving you an overview about economics over the last 2 centuries. It's only 2 centuries old. This chart here, I think, does a nice job of basically giving on the right side what happened in history, things you've heard about. And then what happened in economics? Economics changed as society changed. And that's really the big story here. It's a social science. It's based on how society is organized and what's going on in society. Economists come up with new ideas. Um, so that's an important distinction, social versus the natural sciences. But one thing you'll see, and you see these concepts come up again, no matter what era of history it's been, the same concepts come up over and over: scarcity, choice, well-being. Things are changing. The world is interdependent and becoming more and more so. So let's talk about economic methodology. Again, just comparing natural science. In natural science, you can run experiments. You can hold everything constant except for the independent variable. You can change the independent variable. You can see how it impacts the dependent variable. That's what you're learning in science class. Not really possible in a social science like economics, where you can design an experiment. Think about economics. Say you want to prove that if you offer preschool education to children, that will result in a more educated population that will grow the economy. First of all, an experiment like that would require everything else to be equal for the 50 years while you track the 3 year olds that are in preschool all the way to what does it do to the economy when they become highly productive as 30, 40, and 50 year olds. Not really a practical experiment. You can't hold the world constant and hold everything equal. So that's what's a social science. Now, with that, you'll see this common term over and over for the next year and a half, ceteris paribus, where all things being equal. Economists always use this to say, if you could hold everything equal, then this would happen. However, in the real world, it's almost impossible to hold everything equal. So keep that in mind. Um, the other thing I see students make a lot of mistakes at is positive versus normative statements. In positive economic statements, it's based on facts. Students a lot of times get caught up in the normative economics. What should be? It should be that everybody is treated fairly and equally. Um, that's a statement of opinion, right? Other people have opinions. No, the people who work harder should get more, right? So again, normative and positive economics. When you're making your arguments, you want to stick to positive economics, and then recognize you can make a normative statement and you can try to back it up. Um, okay, so let's go to economic thought. So now, economic thought. Again, we are in just a couple minutes going to go over 2.5 centuries of economic thought. But essentially, and going back to the history you already know, there was this feudal system. Feudal system was like a complete command economy. The Lord was in charge of everything. Who planted what? Who got what? How much taxes they paid? Um, After the feudal system, you started getting kings eventually, and the kings had some of that control over the lords. So that was the feudal system, very command economy. Then you started getting a little richer, and you had people who were trades, people who were good at making shoes, good at making furniture, and they were selling it. And as those trades developed, the economy changed in the mercantilism started. People could trade, and with that trade, they got more control. Um, then you went to capitalism. So capitalism is basically when, in mercantilism, it was family controlled. So the family controlled what they were producing in their own factories. Capitalism kind of separated who owned the business with who ran it. And you had started to have professional managers running the business, and they were going to get capital to run the business. Again, we're going to spend a lot more time on this later. So there's a strong connection between history and the economics that drove history. Um, Now we get into The Economist. Adam Smith, one of, if not the most famous and initial economist, wrote a book in 1776, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of Wealth of the Nations. He came up with what was then a completely radical idea that actually you don't need a lord or a king or someone to control the economy and decide how much to produce. His idea was, in fact, free markets did a much more effective job for almost all markets than having a command economy. It was shocking and a radical concept that still many people who don't study economics don't completely understand. That the government intervention in many cases reduces the choice for customers, reduces the quality for consumers, reduces the selection for consumers. A radical idea. Capitalism took off. And it was all about this invisible hand that was controlling the market. It was basically the pricing mechanism. When prices went up, it signaled to producers, hey, make more of that. You can make money. Um, when people stopped buying things, then that's because they didn't want it anymore. And it signaled to producers to make less. There wasn't some big person with a huge spreadsheet trying to decide who should make what and what they should sell it for, like in a command economy. So this concept, also called laissez-faire, hands off. This is let the government get out of the way and let the markets run things. It'll run much, much better. It was a huge idea, except that there was a huge equity problem with this. And so we'll get into Say's laws later. You should read it, and we'll certainly talk about it later. Um, then you had Karl Marx say, this is a flawed system. This capitalism is just flawed. It's going to end badly. It's not the people with the money who should be running things. It's the people. And the people should be the economy. And they should decide what's going to be made, and who's going to make it, and what's it's going to be sold for, and how much should be made. The government should decide all this. And if the government does it for the people, by the people, it's going to be better for everybody. It's beautiful. Everybody can contribute what they want to society, and then they can take only what they need. It's a beautiful concept, socialism, communism. The problem is it has not worked in real society. It typically, even in communist countries, somebody takes control and they don't necessarily have the people's best interests in mind. They tend to live in palaces and live like the kings did, and the people end up being poor. So then you have this tension between letting the government control things and letting the markets control things. By the way, Das Kapital, that's the book Marx wrote, and it was huge, and it started, was the start of communism, which really only was shown as not a very effective economic system in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell, and I remember that quite well. We're going to do an exercise in class to talk about utility and marginal utility. And we're going to spend a lot more time in class over the next year talking about these classical, neoclassical, so that you'll be able to refer to those things and understand them. So what's going on in the 20th century? Um, Well, you had the Great Depression, and this laissez-faire system wasn't working. The command economy wasn't working, and that's where you had Keynesian revolution. Keynes said, "You know what? The government's got a deficit spend. They got to print money and start spending it to get the economy going again." And so we're getting into his theories, and then once he got into this fiscal theory of Keynesianism, We had stagnation in the 70s and 80s, where both inflation was going crazy and the economy wasn't going crazy. And so then you had the monetarists come in. I mean, we'll get into more of this as the years go on. But you had Milton Friedman, who is a very famous economist, and he said, "No, you got to grow the money supply, monetarists, to get the economy going." In the 21st century, the big things being talked about now is behavioral economics, and we'll talk about that. Uh, the circular economy is another great idea, which is instead of making things and then throwing them away, the economy to be sustainable needs to be a circular economy. And we'll watch. We need to watch this video. We'll do that at some point in time. You could do it now if you want to. So that's kind of the overview of how economists approach the world.